Where it all began, where the Dnieper has not yet known concrete and embankments, where the water breathes mist in the mornings and the shores keep the traces of ancient fires, a story begins, one that cannot be told dryly. There was no capital here, no state, there was not even a name. There were tribes, the Polians, the Drevlians, the Severians, people of land and forest. They lived by the sun and the river, believed in thunder and wind, and knew one thing: the Dnieper was the road. Along this river boats moved, at first, quietly, cautiously, with goods, furs, honey. Later, with weapons and ambition. North and south reached toward one another, and the Dnieper became a thread, stitching different worlds together. The river had seen much. It had seen the Varangians, tall, severe, foreign in language, yet familiar by their gaze. They came not as phantoms, but as an answer to chaos. The tribes grew tired of fighting one another. Each clan pulled the blanket of power toward itself, and then words were spoken that changed history. Our land is great and abundant, but there is no order in it. Thus begins not a legend, but a pact. Here, on the banks of the Dnieper, the idea first emerged of power as order, not merely force. The sword was still important, but the word already mattered no less. Settlements began to grow. Houses pressed close to the river as to a source of life and protection. The Dnieper fed, the Dnieper guided, the Dnieper united. In the morning mist, one could see smoke, fires, a sign that people lived here, that they waited here, that they were ready to trade or to defend themselves. So slowly, almost imperceptibly, from camps and villages, a city began to rise. Not by decree, not by design, by necessity. Kyiv did not yet know its name, but it already knew its fate. To be a crossroads, to be a heart, to be a point of attraction. Here roads converged, along with people and interests. Here foreign gods met local traditions. Here they began to understand, solitude is weakness, unity is strength. An origin does not sound loud. It does not begin with a coronation or the blessing of bells. It begins with a river that flows through centuries and with people who chose to live together. Thus is born not a city, thus is born a space of the future, a land on which history is only learning how to speak when destiny acquires a name. At first, there was silence. The land lived, traded, fought, but did not call itself anything. People knew the river, knew the forest, knew their prince, but they did not know the name of the country. A name never comes at once. It appears when scattered lands begin to feel themselves as one whole. The word Rus sounded different to different ears. To some, it was the name of warriors from the north, people of oar and sword. To others, it was a sign of order, a banner under which one could trade and live. To enemies, it was a warning. The name grew together with power. It was spoken in marketplaces and on campaigns, on the shores of the Black Sea and in Byzantine halls, where strangers were met with caution and the strong with respect. When Kyiv became the center, the name took shape. No longer just a tribe, no longer just an alliance, but a land worth fighting for. Kievan Rus. 2 words, a city and the world around it, a capital and a road. A point from which power spread along rivers like ripples across water. This name was not invented by scribes. It was forged by campaigns, treaties, blood, and trade. It was fixed by tribute and protection, by fear and by hope. From that moment, outsiders understood. Before them were not scattered settlements, but a force with a name. One could trade with it, one could fight it, but it could not be ignored. The name became a shield. Under it, warriors gathered. Under it, oaths were sworn. Under it, for the first time, a simple thought emerged. We are one. Kyivan Rus did not yet know its fate. It did not foresee glory, division, or fall, but the name already lived, and once spoken aloud there was no turning back. From that moment on, Ruses existed not only in land, but in word, a city that became greater than itself. It was never meant to be the main one. Kyiv was not designed as a capital. It simply stood where paths converged, and where standing aside was impossible. High hills above the Dnieper offered vision and defense. The river brought trade and movement. The forest gave shelter. The steppe brought threat, a reminder that strength was necessary. Kiev grew not from luxury, but from necessity. Merchants stopped here, repaired their boats, traded furs for silver, and rumors for decisions. The city absorbed everything: languages, customs, fears, and ambitions. It learned how to be a center without yet realizing it was one. Roads stretched toward it like veins toward a heart. From the north came the Varangian route, from the south, Byzantium and the sea. Kiev became a knot where trade turned into power. Here the prince was more than a warrior. He became an arbiter, a judge, a guarantor of safety. As long as Kiev stood strong, the road remained open. That is why the city came to be called the mother of Rus's cities, not for its beauty, but for its role. From Kiev, orders flowed outward. Along the rivers marched the war bands, carrying with them influence. What began as a settlement became the center of an entire world, but a heart is always vulnerable. Kiev knew this from its earliest days. It saw raids, burned, was rebuilt again, and grew stronger each time. Every hill remembered battles. Every landing remembered farewells. The city lived in constant tension, like a man standing at the edge of an era. Kiev did not merely rule, it set the rhythm. As long as it beat, Rus's remained whole. And it was here that history first realized it had a center. Those who turned land into power. A state does not arise on its own. It needs faces, decisions, and people willing to take responsibility and to pay for it with their lives. The first was Oleg, a stranger by blood, yet native by destiny. He came not as a destroyer, but as a strategist. He took Kiev not through fury, but through calculation, and he spoke words that became both sentence and promise. Let Kiev be the mother of Rus's cities. Oleg understood the essential thing. The road mattered more than the battle. He took control of the rivers, linked north and south, and made tribute serve order. His campaign against Constantinople was not only war, but a declaration. Russes must now be reckoned with. After him came Igor. Less cunning, less cautious. He wanted more, and paid for it. His attempt to collect tribute twice became a lesson for all princes. Power without measure kills. That lesson was learned by Olga, a woman who entered history through cold calculation. Her revenge on the Drevlians was terrifying, but her reforms were saving. She created an organized system of tribute, turning chaos into order. The state became governable. Then came Sviatoslav, a prince without a palace, a warrior without fear. He spoke simply, "I am coming at you." His life passed in the saddle. His home was the campaign. He expanded borders without strengthening the rear, leaving Rus both powerful and vulnerable. These princes were different: cunning, greed, cold reason, warrior fury. But it was they who turned a scattered land into a state, not by theory, but by the harsh rules of their time. Through them, Rus's first felt that power has faces, and that history gains character. The moment Rus's changed forever. Until then, faith had been a matter of clan. Each prayed to their own gods, each asked protection from forest, thunder, and fire. Perun gave strength, Veles wealth, Dajbog hope. But the state had outgrown old rituals, alliances expanded, trade crossed tribal borders, and pagan gods could not speak the language of empires. Prince Vladimir understood this. Not at once, not easily. He was a man of his age, harsh, forceful, contradictory. He raised pagan shrines and then made the decision to destroy them. The choice of faith became a choice of direction, not only spiritual, but political. Russes looked south, toward Byzantium, where belief was the very grammar of power. In the year 988, the Dnieper witnessed an event that changed everything. People were baptized not one by one, but as a people. The water washed away the old world and opened a new page. Some accepted the faith sincerely, some with fear, some by command. But there was no road back. With baptism came books, writing, architecture, new laws, and new meanings. The shrine gave way to the church, the idol to the icon, the oath by fire to the written word. Rus entered the Christian world not as a pupil, but as an equal. From that moment on, its history became part of a wider European destiny. This was a turning point after which the land could no longer remain the same. Rus gained not only faith, it gained direction when strength acquired reason. After storms and turning points, a state needs balance, not silence, but order. And that order came with the name Yaroslav. He entered history not as a conqueror, but as a builder. His main weapon was not the sword, but law, word, and alliance. Under his rule, Rus ceased to be a land of constant war and became a state that knew how to negotiate. Yaroslav understood. Fear rules briefly, justice across generations. The Rus justice appeared, the first legal code: no scaffold, no blind cruelty, fines instead of blood, law instead of vengeance. For its time, this was bold. For Europe, unexpected. Kiev flourished. Stone churches rose skyward, solid and majestic, as if faith itself had taken form. Saint Sophia of Kiev became not just a cathedral, but a symbol of maturity. Yaroslav looked beyond borders. He married his daughters to kings, turning dynastic unions into political bridges. France, Norway, Hungary. Rus was heard in Europe not as a frontier, but as an equal. Cities grew, crafts strengthened, writing became common, chroniclers began to record time, understanding that it had value. But a golden age never announces itself loudly. It lives in the feeling of stability when it seems that it will last forever. Under Yaroslav, Rus stood at its peak, strong, respected, united. And that is precisely why this height was the most dangerous. For after prosperity comes the test. When the word became stronger than the sword, a state can be held by force, but only culture leaves a trace. In this era, Rus began to speak to itself, not through the clash of battles, but through lines meant to outlive them. Chroniclers appeared. People who understood that time passes, but words remain. They recorded not only victories, but mistakes, leaving future generations an honest conversation with the past. Literacy ceased to be rare. Birch bark letters spoke of everyday life, debts, love, quarrels, concerns. History became not only princely, but human. Architecture found its voice. Stone replaced wood. Churches rose toward the sky, adorned with frescoes and mosaics where every line carried meaning. Cities learned to be beautiful, icon painting became prayer in color. Faces looked out calm and severe, as if reminding, earthly power is temporary, memory is eternal. Music, tales, and epic songs passed from mouth to mouth. Heroes became symbols, their deeds moral landmarks. People learned to recognize themselves in stories. Culture bound scattered lands more tightly than any sword. Shared images, shared words, shared memory. And in that moment, Rus ceased to be merely territory. It became a civilization. From then on, it could never be destroyed completely, for even if walls fall, the word remains, and the word outlives any state. When unity begins to break from within, a golden age rarely ends all at once. It fractures slowly, almost imperceptibly, like ice in spring. While Kiev still shone, discontent grew in the shadows. Every prince wanted to be supreme. Every city sought independence. Shared authority began to feel restrictive. The law was one, but interests were many. Sons divided inheritance like spoils, not responsibility. Testaments became causes for war. Feuds flared between brothers, nephews, and yesterday's allies. Blood was spilled not for land, but for thrones. Kiev was losing control, not because it was weak, but because too many centers of power were rising at once. Novgorod, Chernihiv, Vladimir, each saw itself as equal. Trade no longer flowed only through the capital. Routes shifted. Rivers chose new masters, and with them, influence slipped away. People grew accustomed to living without a single center. Local rule felt closer, common authority, distant. Unity survived in memory, not in decisions. Rus still existed, formally, but cracks had already spread through its foundations, and the most dangerous moment lay ahead. When a state argues with itself, it fails to hear footsteps from outside. History held its breath. When what no one is ready for arrives, they came not as a raid, not as a familiar enemy, but as a force of nature, without mercy, without negotiation. From the east moved a power few truly understood, fast, silent, unafraid of death. While princes argued over thrones, the steppe was gathering its strike. Each principality prepared in its own way, each alone. The first blow was a warning. It went unheard. The second came without mercy. Cities burned, not as in old wars, slowly and painfully, but swiftly, as if the land itself surrendered. Walls that had stood for centuries proved helpless against a new way of war. Horse, bow, spear, and iron discipline. Kiev waited for aid, but none came. Alliances existed in words, not in action. Each saved only itself. When Kiev fell, it was more than a military defeat. It was a strike against memory, against a symbol, against the heart of Rus. Churches were destroyed, streets emptied, the sound of bells gave way to silence. Rus's did not vanish in that moment, but it lost the center that had held everything together. From that day on, history ceased to be one. It scattered along different roads, leaving behind ashes and a single question. Could it have been otherwise? Fate made its move, and it was merciless. When what no one was ready for arrived, they did not come like raiders, not like a familiar enemy. They came like a force of nature, without mercy, without negotiation. From the east advanced a power few truly understood, swift, silent, unafraid of death. While princes argued over thrones, the steppe was gathering its strike, each principality prepared in its own way, each alone. The first blow was a warning. It went unheard. The second came with no chance for mercy. Cities burned, not as in earlier wars, slow and cruel, but swiftly, as if the land itself surrendered. Walls that had stood for centuries proved helpless against a new way of war. Horse and bow, speed and iron discipline. Kiev waited for help, but help did not come. Alliances existed in words, not in action. Each saved only itself. When Kiev fell, it was more than a military defeat. It was a blow to memory, to a symbol, to the very heart of Rus. Churches were shattered, streets fell silent, the ringing of bells gave way to emptiness. Rus's did not vanish in that moment, but it lost the center that had held everything together. From that day on, history was no longer one. It scattered along diverging roads, leaving behind ashes and a single question. Could it have been otherwise? Fate made its move, and it was merciless. What survived the ashes? History does not always die with cities. Sometimes it simply changes its shape. After the fall of Kiev, Rus's did not disappear. It scattered, like seeds carried by the wind, taking root in new lands. The principalities grew different, in character, in destiny. In the paths they were forced to choose, yet in each of them lived the memory of a common origin. The laws endured, the faith remained shared, the language bound more tightly than borders. Culture became what could not be taken away. In the northeast, new centers of power rose. In the west, Rusas learned to exist beside other worlds. Each road was difficult, but the route was the same. Kiev ceased to be a capital, but it did not cease to be a symbol. A city of memory, a city of beginnings. The place from which everything once flowed. The legacy of Kyivan Rus lies not in borders and not in crowns. It lies in the idea of authority, of law, of responsibility. Here, for the first time, a simple truth was voiced. A state is not only force, but duty. Rusas survived the blow of fate because it became more than itself, because it became a civilization. And as long as this legacy lives, the story of Kyivan Rus is not finished. A story that does not leave every great story has an ending. But not every ending is final. Kyivan Rus did not end on a single date in a chronicle. It dissolved into time, leaving a mark deeper than any border. It no longer exists as a state, but it lives on as a beginning. As a point of origin to which eyes return again and again. Centuries passed. Names changed. Capitals rose and fell. New states emerged, arguing over the past, dividing the inheritance of history. Yet the root remained, in language, in faith, in the idea of justice and truth, in the memory that once different lands were able to become one. Kievan Rus taught one essential lesson. Unity is fragile, but it is possible. Power is temporary, meaning endures. History never repeats itself exactly, but it speaks to those willing to listen. And each time it asks the same question. What have we done with the legacy we were given? The finale is not a period, it is a reflection. Kievan Rus is not the past. It is part of the present. And that is why this story still looks at us from the depths of centuries.